Hi there, I am Dr. Mairead Masuda here with JWP, and today our topic is detoxing. And I call this taking out the trash because that is essentially what happens when we detox. Our body is constantly breaking things down, moving things around, making larger things, making smaller things, and all those byproducts, all those things will be broken down and should exit our body. So that's why I called it taking out the trash, because that's what our body does. Our body is pretty incredible and it does this constantly on a day-to-day basis. And I also want to, before we get into this, I wanted to say that none of this information is to scare anyone into being afraid of everything that we have around us. None of us are able to completely get away from all the things that we're exposed to. But again, back to my initial point is that our body is really good at detoxing, and it's very adaptive. So what I'm going to talk about, hopefully it's not scary. Mostly it's just to empower you to know that you can make changes to your health. Your health is in your hands, and you're not just at the whim of just what our environment is like. Okay, so let's get started. So what does detoxification mean? So detoxification is the process of reducing the body's toxic load by lessening exposure to harmful chemicals that are all around us, while we simultaneously implement nutrition and lifestyle strategies to promote efficient elimination of toxins from the body. Like I said, we are always doing this, but sometimes, whether it's because of illness, because of certain diet, because of just too much toxic load, sometimes our body gets a little bit bogged down. We need to support it a little bit. And so the most common route of exposure for these toxins is through our lungs. We do inhale a lot of them, if you think about car exhaust or living in the city and factories and things like that, that's where the most common route of exposure would be. It does also enter our gut and skin over time. And so it'd be more chronic exposure. So if you think about on our skin, all the things that we, shampoo, conditioner, moisturizers, cleansers, everything like that, some of that does get absorbed. And then once it's inside, the major storage sites are the kidneys, liver, fat, and bone. So like I said, where do we get exposed the most from? And so a lot of it is from our food. So for example, we are going to the grocery store and we're getting vegetables there as opposed to maybe a farmer's market where things are local, or a CSA box where it's all local farms. All those foods need to be preserved in some way because they're coming from a long distance. So that is one way that we can get toxins in our food, as well as the fact that a lot of our breads and everything like that are made up of multiple different ingredients as opposed to the few basic ingredients that it actually makes up if you would make it at home, which I know. Who has time to do that? I don't. The other thing is from our water. So it's another way that we can get exposed to toxins is through our water, because when they actually clean and treat our water at facilities, some of those solvents can get left behind. And in addition, hopefully nobody is drinking tap water, not in California at least. I know there's some other countries that have better tap water, but we really don't, unfortunately. So it's always good to have a good filter. The other way is through our air, which I've already mentioned, just from combustion of fuels and waste. And then lastly, our homes. So, since the 1970s, our homes have become much more energy efficient, which is great because we're not spending as much on energy. However, that keeps everything inside. So because we have all that insulation so we don't get cold during the winter or too hot during the summer, everything is kept inside the house. There's not as much airflow through. So if you think about when we bring new products home, like a new couch or a mattress that has been made somewhere where they need to use some chemicals in order to process the fabric or whatever they need to do, those things will off gas in our home. They get trapped. So what are some symptoms of toxic burden? So like I said, most of the time, our body is really great at getting rid of all these things and doesn't need much support because it is wonderful. But occasionally, our body just can't do that, either because it's overloaded or it's just become inefficient for whatever reason. And so those toxins begin to build up. And so the symptoms that we'll have will range anywhere from, allergies, difficulty losing weight, hormonal imbalances, up to, neurological disorders, sometimes cancer, infertility, and lots of other things. Another thing that can happen is the fact that when these chemicals attach to our cell walls, they can actually change the structure of the cells so that something called toxin-induced loss of tolerance happens. And so what happens here is that you've got like you see in my picture, a susceptible person for whatever reason. Like I said, maybe they've been sick, maybe they are eating an inflammatory diet. And so they get exposed either an acute higher exposure to or chronically low levels over time. And this initiates this tilt syndrome, this toxin induced loss of tolerance, so that then they become this very sensitive person, so that anytime they come in contact with any of these things, they get a more extreme reaction. This is also called multiple chemical sensitivity. So this is also something that can happen, and it's pretty common. So what kinds of things do we detox? One of the things that we look at very often is something called mycotoxins. So there's mold everywhere, and thank goodness, because we wouldn't be able to survive without lots of different kinds of mold. And they're naturally occurring, and some molds do produce mycotoxins, however, not all of them. And they'll do this when they feel threatened. So, for example, if you see some mold, and if it just happens to be the one that makes mycotoxins, if you're going to scrub away at it, and you're not wearing a mask, they're going to throw out these spores, which can then are easily inhaled and can release mycotoxins. Again, not everybody will be affected by this. Some people more so than others. More often, there are the allergenic types of molds that cause, the sneezing. You can just tell when some place is moldy. Sneezing, itchy eyes, congestion. But so far, there's about 200 mycotoxins that we know of now. And mostly we'll be exposed to these through water-damaged buildings or contaminated foods. So, for example, coffee. Don't worry, I'm not gonna say don't drink coffee, but coffee is one of them because they tend to be picked at places not very close by, and they have that perfect little groove that is just that coffee beans. It just has that little groove that is perfect for mold growth because we're having to transport them over long distances and they're stored for long periods of time. This can happen. The other thing is peanuts. Actually, that is also common with peanuts too. And like I said, the symptoms from mycotoxin illness can be anywhere from allergic reactions to asthma, to more serious like neurotoxic reactions, fungal issues, and everything like that. The other thing that we're just exposed to is heavy metals, and now they're naturally found in our environment, in the soil and the air. And this is because we had that big industry boom, the Industrial Revolution, which made so many things so much easier for us. But again, now we have, more exposure, more exposure to these heavy metals, and they will get, again, like older homes through technology, through industry. These heavy metals are now found in the soil and in the air. So then when we, as well as water, so that when we grow our food now, a lot of these heavy metals will be taken up. Because our food that's growing absorbs these nutrients and the heavy metals go with it, so we can get exposed that way as well. And I don't know if anyone has recently seen the New Consumer Report study that talked about dark chocolate, but cacao beans are one of those plants that really takes up those nutrients from the soil in addition to heavy metals, mostly cadmium and lead. And so I don't know if you were brokenhearted by some of the dark chocolates that were found on there, because it's my go-to evening snack. So hopefully we can find some better options. But again, some symptoms of heavy metal exposure would be more so GI dysfunction, but it can then also progress to neurological dysfunction, memory loss, fatigue, joint pain, things like that. So environmental toxins. So now this is something that heavy metals will come under this category as well. But when I'm talking about environmental toxins, I'm mostly talking about the ones that we would find out in the environment, like, pesticides, herbicides, for people who are in the military and they're around heavy artillery, they would get exposed there. Our personal care products are probably the number one place where we get exposed to these, because if you think about it, every day, how many personal care products do we use? Maybe a deodorant, we'll maybe shampoo and condition our hair every once in a while, put on some moisturizer, some face moisturizers, some, on our body, serums, nail polish, hair dye, all sorts of things. So we use a lot more than I think we really think about. And so, there are, again, not to scare you, but there's aluminum in deodorants, there are phthalates and parabens. I'm sure these are some things that you've come to notice, that a lot of our shampoos may say like phthalates free or paraben free, because a lot of these environmental toxins will be found in these personal care products. And one of the great things that I'm probably going to talk about next is an app called Skin Deep, and it's by the Environmental Working Group. So one of the things that you can do is when you're out, I'm not saying go throw everything out, but if you have to get some more shampoo or you have to get some new moisturizer, what you can do is you use the app and you can scan the barcode of the product that you want to get, and it'll tell you what's the rating. Does it have some of these environmental toxins in it, or is it pretty clean? So that way you can make little changes over time. And the thing about these toxins is that they bind to insulin receptor sites. So I'm sure you know that metabolic disease is a huge issue in our country. And they found that these toxins bind to insulin receptor sites. And so our pancreas has to work harder and harder and harder to get this insulin out. And eventually it burns out. And then we're left dealing with metabolic issues, which, increased weight gain, difficulty with diet, everything like that. Leads on to heart disease. So it's that rolling, was it the rock, the rolling moss? I'm not thinking of the correct one right now, but you know what I mean. Okay, so where do we start? And I already mentioned that EWG verified app called Skin Deep. So that was a really easy way to just start making little changes to our personal care products and everything like that. And the other thing that you want to do is start to, look at your home as well. So like I mentioned before, when you are getting something new, for example, with mattresses, and we're lucky in San Diego because we have such good weather. A lot of people will leave their mattresses outside just to take the packaging off, let it off gas so it's outside, and then you can bring it in the home. The other thing is you want to obviously work with a qualified practitioner to discuss your symptoms. And then we can figure out, okay, what is the most likely culprit? And we can do texting to figure out exactly where that's coming from. So talking about testing, there's no one way that is, the gold standard over another. We check blood and urine, and that's usually good for current exposure, but we can also do provoked urine testing, which means we will give you something that helps to draw out, especially heavy metals, and we'll draw them out from where they're being stored so that then we can get an idea of what is your total body burden. Hair is really good for past exposure, but again, not everybody detoxes well through their hair, so it's individual. And then fat biopsy is the best for environmental toxins, but again, it's invasive and not easy to come by. So, there's a few different options, and it just depends on what is the most likely exposure for you, and just you as an individual. So I wanted to show, just prior to moving on, what healthy versus unhealthy detoxification looks like. So on the bottom of the screen, hopefully you can see it clearer, is healthy detoxification. So you can see that most of the toxins we take in we'll excrete them through bowel movement, through stool. And maybe just a little bit will then get recirculated and go back to your liver. And when it gets to your liver, it's going to be broken down in a few different phases to non-toxic metabolites. And usually it gets more water soluble as it goes on, and then your kidneys excrete it and you just pee it out. So that's what healthy detoxification looks like. But if for some reason there's just it's unhealthy, whether it's you're really bogged down by toxins, or you eat a lot of sugar or processed foods, or there's certain medications, then we can get the unhealthy pathway where the digestive system, perhaps in your gut, you've got some leaky gut for whatever reason. It can be stress, can be diet, food sensitivities, medications. So a lot of those toxins leak out. So all those toxins then go to the liver. Because there's so much going to the liver, it has a hard time breaking them down. And in those phases of detoxification, breaking them down to the non-toxic metabolites. So it's not broken down as easily. And some of those then get recirculated. And when they're recirculated, they like to then settle in the places that I mentioned, like in the brain, in the nervous system, in the fat. Mostly those are the three places that it'll be stored. So what can we do about it? So the first thing that I always like to address is your drainage pathways. Before starting any kind of supplement therapy or anything like that, we want to make sure that these pathways are open. So what does that mean? Defecation is the first one. Are you having regular bowel movements? That means daily, at least 1 to 3 times daily. You're not straining. They're easy to pass. That is one, because what happens is that toxins will wind up in your bloodstream and they're going to go to your liver, just like we talked about. And they're going to try and make them water soluble, just like we talked about. And then the bile that comes from your liver and your gallbladder is going to then just take them into your colon, and then you poop them out. It's exactly what you want to happen. The other is urination. So we want to make sure that you are drinking enough water to help with any of the toxins that then are broken down and become water soluble, that pass through to your kidneys so that you can excrete them that way. The other drainage pathway is expiration. So if you think about it, it's kind of interesting because it's a less obvious way that we detoxify, but we breathe out carbon dioxide all the time. We also breathe out something called volatile organic compounds. So as we're breaking things down, this is another way to detoxify. And then lastly, perspiration. So, sweating. And one way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, if you're exercising, you're moving, that's going to get your lymphatic system moving. It's going to get you sweating, hopefully. And it's going to help you, it's going to get you breathing heavier too. So you're killing a few birds with 1 stone and getting some good drainage pathways open. So we always want to make sure that those things are flowing very well prior to starting any detox process, so they don't just build up and make you feel pretty terrible as you're detoxing. One other thing that can get in the way of proper detoxing is something called biofilms. So biofilm formation is a pretty common thing to talk about when it comes to medical devices that are placed inside the body, or ports or things like that. They're always looking out to make sure that there's no biofilm forming, because what happens is that the bacteria settle, they form this little jelly-like substance over them, they secrete that, and it just protects them. So it protects them from antibiotics. And they love the gut because they're getting fed constantly. They're just getting, it's like a buffet. They're getting fed constantly, but they're nice and hidden in their little biofilm. So that is one way that if someone is not getting better as we're detoxing, drainage pathways are open. They're doing everything that they can, but they're still not fully getting better. This is something that we're always going to look for. So treatment. I realize my pictures have gone a little bit weird here, but you get the gist. So first, this is just like the the very basics of treatment. Clean water. I know that seems like duh, but making sure you're drinking enough so you can flush out your kidneys, and making sure it's clean, so you're using a filter, because of all those reasons I talked about before with solvents and bacteria and things like that that are found in our water sources. The other is clean food. So I know I had mentioned, trying to buy local when possible, just because it doesn't have to be preserved, so it can travel such a long distance. And then organic whenever possible as well, because there's less likelihood of them being sprayed with any pesticides or other chemicals. And I know this is as much as you can. Lastly, the other two are clean air. So remember, I talked about our homes are being so energy efficient, which is great, but then that doesn't let a lot of air through. So an easy way to do that is during the day, open the windows, use fans so that air is circulating. You get fresh air in and out, as well as having a air filter, at least a HEPA filter, and at the very least running it in your bedroom. And I say that because that is where you spend the most amount of time, just lying there breathing in and out. So having a HEPA filter running all day in your bedroom, I never stop it. I just keep it going. And then, yes, of course, ideally, if you can have it in other parts of the house, that is great. But that's a good start. And another way to get some good clean air is doing some breath work, getting that through your lungs. And then lastly, the two last things, sweat, like we talked about. And this, yes, it can be done through exercise. If you have access to an infrared sauna, that's amazing. But if you don't, which a lot of us don't, wearing extra clothing while you work out. So you're just getting that sweat going. And then lastly, good sleep. So, getting that 7 to 8 hours, I know everyone is slightly different, but around that 7 to 8 hours, because sleep is our time for our brain to detox. And another thing is that if and I'm definitely a culprit of this, if we've eaten in the last 2 to 3 hours prior to sleep, our body's going to be spending more time focusing on our GI detox versus our brain detox. So I have to work on that too. So the takeaways from this: 1, listen to your body. Our bodies are so great at telling us when something is wrong. It's just that sometimes we ignore it. And I tell my kids this, I'm like, you got to listen to your body. It's going to get angry at you. And so that is number one. The second is don't stress. Like I said at the beginning, this information is not to scare you. This is to empower you, to show you that there are things that you can do. There are ways that you can support your body, and your body's already amazing at doing all these things. Sometimes it just needs a little bit of extra help. And third, mental health. Again, I talked about how toxins will then, if they're recirculating, they can then get stored in their nervous system. So taking care of your mental health and knowing that as you detoxify, sometimes these things can make you feel a little bit worse at the start and then it gets better. And just having that support, that mental health support, is very important. And then, yeah, this is all about identifying where you can make small changes to your environment over time. I'm not saying go throw out all your food, go throw out all your personal care products. It's about making those little changes over time, increasing your water intake a little bit, sweating a little bit more, using that app so you can see what your personal care products are like when you go to buy something new. And then lastly, please always work with a qualified practitioner, and make sure you test. I know that, there are the treatments on the previous page I mentioned, these are all things that you can do already, but there are, of course, lots of supplementation, medications that will help when you become overly burdened. So please work with a qualified practitioner that knows what they're doing, knows how to test, and knows how to treat based on your individual needs, not just the blanket treatment of maybe someone you saw online. So, we're always here to help. We can run these tests for you, and we're always happy to help with people feel better, help detoxify their system. But again, please don't stress. This is just the world we live in, and our bodies are already great at doing most of these things already. Just needs a little bit of extra help every now and again. All right, please give us a call if you have any questions about this or about the testing or anything that we talked about today. We're always here, happy to hear from you and happy to help. Thanks.